Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program. This is a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of the Infinity series and founder of Engine Books. Let's see what we have today.
Okay, we're here on a very special episode of the Write Project podcast. I know I say that every episode of the Write Project podcast is special, but this one super really is. We are on the line with Susan Flanagan, the breakthrough author of Supermarket Baby, an amazing new novel from Flanker Press. It is an award-winning novel. It won the Percy James Award as well a few years back, and when it was in its infancy, as well as Susan went on with pitching this book to win the Pitch the Publishers contest several years back, and has started her publishing journey as a result of that. Thank you for joining us on the Write Project podcast, Susan. You're an amazing author.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, Matthew.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I already know the premise, so just so that I don't go insane and start talking about stuff and the readers don't know, or the listeners don't know what I mean, tell me about Supermarket Baby. Give me that wonderful pitch that you gave me.
Supermarket Baby is about a man who goes to the supermarket and he comes home with a baby.
Was it on the shelf? Like, oh wow, special on babies, $2.99.
Henry Puddester, he's not only a space cadet, but the morning he goes to the supermarket, he has mistakenly taken a very powerful prescription drug by mistake. And he is completely out of it. He switches shopping carts with a young mother, which is not out of character with him, but doesn't really notice until he gets to the cash that there's a car seat in the shopping cart with one of those cloth covers over the top.
Okay.
And when he looks in, there's an infant inside.
Okay. That sounds like a lot of fun. So I imagine hijinks ensue kind of thing.
Yes. Henry's life begins to slide sideways very quickly, and he is introduced to the correction system.
Good. Well, no, not good, but that sounds legit. Yeah, because you imagine in real life, you'd just, this is where fiction kind of takes hold, because you imagine that in real life this would be a fairly simple thing to fix. Not simple, but you just kind of raise up your hands and go like, oh crap, kind of thing. Like someone get on the pager at the supermarket, we'll find this mom, and I will either fess up to it or run away. Like, here you go, cashier lady.
Henry runs away, but with the baby. He feels if he gives it up at the supermarket, he might put the baby in the hands of a sinister person. So he says, I'll go home to my lawyer wife, Millie, and she'll find out what the best thing to do.
Does she leave him?
You mean permanently in the marriage?
Yeah.
No, she is extremely tolerant, and like a lot of successful marriages, both she and Henry are polar opposites, but they make things work.
You don't at all sound like you're speaking from experience there.
28 years.
Yeah.
But I realize, that I'm equally challenging in the relationship.
For sure. All right, well, that sounds lovely. So I know you had a big gala launch planned at Ballyhally, and because we're at the present time of recording this, not sure, hopefully things will be better when it airs, but presently we are at alert level 5 with COVID here in the province. So that launch, as well as a few others, like our launch of Helen Escott's book and a few other things, have been delayed or gone online. Do you think you'll be doing anything online, or are you switching to just a later launch event or things like that?
I think I will do something online, but I also am waiting for when things open up and I can do an in-person event as well. I almost think of those as two separate things. So in person, I can present a lot better than online. And the in-person event was going to feature really fun door prizes, like hors d'oeuvres that one of the characters, Dolores, likes. And the motorcycle that features prominently in the book, the 1970 Triumph Bonneville, was going to be present at the
I
launch.
thought you were going to say that was going to be a door prize. I'm like, oh, really? I'll show up to that lunch.
No, but we had great door prizes, including free books, but we had things like a webcam, helmet camera.
You should
And
steal shopping carts from like the local supermarket and give them out as door prizes. Just be
I
like,
had a request put into Coleman's to borrow 2 of their small shopping carts so that if any children show up, they can put the baby in the cart and push it around. Yeah, there were lots of fun things going to happen at the launch. And in the big scheme of things, launch being postponed, that's okay. I've heard from people who said they were going to wait until the launch to purchase the book.
yeah,
But now they've gone to a store or gone directly to Flanker Press and purchased from them, which is great too. It just means at the launch, there'll probably be fewer books sold.
well, maybe, but you might have more books signed. Like people might show up with the book already in hand, which is fine and still show support and stuff like that. I that is kind of the hardest thing sometimes about this is educating your potential customers and all the people who follow you to go like, listen, I know that launches are fun and we're still going to have a party, but like, I still need sales to prove that this is going to be good so that I get called back for a next book. Please go online and buy the book, or please go on Amazon or
I
Chapter.
have received tremendous support from friends and family across the world. Flanker has sent the book to Germany. I know in Australia, a friend ended up getting it in ebook form just because it wouldn't work right away trying to order from outside the country. But I've had people in Alberta and British Columbia and Ontario send me pictures of the book arriving and how excited they were. So I'm thinking I may post on social media a picture of someone with the book in each province and then try and do the territories.
That could be fun. That could be super fun. Yeah, no, that is wonderful. Yeah, it's a lovely book. I had the pleasure of reading it before it came out as part of the pitch to publisher thing. You sent me a good chunk of the material, and it was again in a no doubt more infant format, but it's a really great book. It's just amazing. It's fun and irreverent and just kind of like the epitome of the Percy James. Like there's a Percy James type of book, and this is very much that.
I think a lot of people who aren't involved in publishing or writing something of a novel length manuscript are surprised to know how much has changed since I won the award. So the award was 2019, and there have to have been 30 iterations since then. So it's always evolving. And if it weren't published yet or the final manuscript not sent in, it will continue to evolve because those characters are living beings in my head and they do things that I can't control. All I do is move their actions to the computer.
That is an interesting point that's often lost on people who aren't writers, is that like there's a lot of myths about writing and writers and publishing. I deal with this a lot in a couple of groups I'm in with young writers and stuff like that, like large groups where they try to pair up people who are like knowledgeable about the industry with people who aren't, so that questions can get answered and stuff like that. But there's a lot of myths, and one of the bigger ones is like this, the author being a sole thing, that only one voice goes into the writing of a book and that's it. That like some people, I swear, think that the first draft is gold, and I'm like, no, never. But like even that, like you can do 40 drafts of it on your own, it's still gonna need an editor and it's still gonna go through a major overhaul and stuff like that. Like people need to not be precious about their drafts. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's amazing the number of mistakes, factual errors that I can introduce thinking that I'm correct, but then you get an expert in that area to read it and you go, wow, like how could I have got it so wrong? So there were tiny things, well, not tiny, had they been published, I'd be devastated, but right at the last minute, right before it went to print, I had a lawyer double check a scene in the courtroom, and I had the order the lawyers presented in the courtroom reversed. That was at the 11th hour. And I thought, wow, like that got through so many editors and I still had that wrong. And then there are small things like, oh, don't tell me the score. I can't even remember. This could be my other novel, but Don't Tell Me the Score is it's a website where in Newfoundland and Labrador in particular, hockey games happen late at night, and a lot of the younger children can't stay up to watch them. So in the morning, they can watch about a 3-minute précis of the game, and it shows the highlights from each period, and then they don't know the score until the end of the little précis. And
Right.
I call that an app. And apparently it had been an app, but the NHL shut it down. And so I said, don't tell me the score app. And it's
Okay.
just, there were 20 mistakes like that in there.
That's interesting because app has, so I don't want to get into that, but app has an interesting like series of meanings kind of thing. So I'm not sure that was entirely wrong, but I don't want to get into the minutia of
It
that.
had been an app, but it was shut down and it was no longer an app. And anyway, I thought, oh, but people who I guess log on to it all the time knew that, and someone pointed it out to me, and I was very thankful to learn things like that before the book went to press. And I'm
Yeah.
sure there are still mistakes in there, and I did
Oh, there's
write
always.
in my thanks that, you know, mistakes are my own, even if I've consulted people. Anything that wiggled their way, or any mistakes that wiggled their way in, they are mine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I had I've talked about it on the show before, but when I was younger, much younger, and just as stupid as I am now, I wrote a legal thriller that will never see the light of day because we're both old, and I was writing before the internet existed, so I had no way to Google how like a courtroom worked, and all I had was bad Law and Order episodes to base it off of. So like I just went ahead with just the absolute confidence that only a complete idiot can have and wrote a legal thriller where like the defense lawyer would change sides in the middle of the thing, like based on the evidence he would just change sides and be like up for the prosecution and then change back in this gotcha moment and stuff that you cannot do. And I remember being like, well, because I didn't know the internet would ever exist, because who did? I'm sitting there like, well, no one will ever be able to look it up, so who's to say if I'm right or not? Screw it.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean? And it's like,
Except for lawyers throughout the world.
yeah,
But I think it's a necessary that novelists write that first novel. And it's like your first baby, you know, you don't have a clue. And so even if that one never gets published, it paves the way for the one that does. And the very first one I wrote, I still love the premise. So that seed of an idea, I think I will rework. But when I go back to look at it, I think, holy shebangers, this is a piece of crap.
yeah, absolutely. So hopefully I've again, I've read Supermarket Baby. I encourage everyone to. It won't be when this airs, of course, but today is I Read Canadian Authors Day, so I'm definitely going to share out like Supermarket Baby stuff because it's important to give new authors like as much of a leg up as they can, especially when it's a first book. It's interesting you're saying you need to write that first bad book, like you were saying, because like it's true, and I often use the term in my classes young authors, and what I mean by that isn't a young person, like a teen or 20 something who's a writer. I mean someone who's writing a novel for the first time. Because in
Yeah.
my experience, like a 15-year-old writing their first novel will make the same mistakes as a 50-year-old writing their first novel. Like there are first novel mistakes, and the only way to get them out of your system is to write that first novel and then have someone rip it apart and show you what the mistakes are, kind of thing. It's the only way to get over that preciousness and stuff like that. Um,
There's a
I
great
go
There's a
ahead.
great book I discovered called Save the Cat Writes a Novel.
Yeah.
And I think it's brilliant. It's based upon screenwriting and was adapted for the novel, but it basically says that almost all successful stories have 15 major beats or points in them. And if you follow that format,
Yeah.
your story too will be successful. So the story that you have to tell doesn't change. It's how it's presented that will make it, riveting to the reader.
I find that that's true, and I use that kind of stuff when I'm teaching my classes. I use an 8-point method where we're called. I'm familiar with the 15-point one. There's a harmonized version that's 8 points that I tend to use. I find it simpler, but like most of the points have like A, B, C in them, so really it's still 15.
Yeah.
It's just simpler to group them together, I find. But um I find that that's something that some writers have a hard time with. Like I find that there's a breed of author that's almost too artsy with it, where like and the first draft it's fine if it's all over the place, but they refuse to put, as though like putting formula to a work is cheating. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's making it understandable. You know what I mean?
Well, you can tell a joke and you can have all the components of the joke, but really flop. But then someone who knows the formula can tell that joke and have 300 people roaring with laughter and
That's
tears
true.
running down their face.
That's very true. Sometimes it is in the way it's told and in the formula of the joke and how a joke is constructed and how it works. And it's the same way with a novel. That's very true. Um, Susan Flanagan, if you could tell your younger writing self any one thing, what would it be?
That if I have a character who is unlikable, I have to step back from the writing and look at that character's past and get to know him or her better so that I can make the character sympathetic to the reader. So I think the first two novels I wrote, I had an unsympathetic character, and people told me, but it actually took a couple of years before it really sank in, and that I could step back and say, okay, now I know how to fix this character to make readers like him, because otherwise they wouldn't have continued reading.
No, for sure. So do you consider the main character from Supermarket Baby to be like an unlikable character, or no?
I was referring to two books previous
That's
to
fine.
Supermarket Baby, but Henry, I did have people who read it, my beta readers, who said, why does Millie stay with him? And I liked Henry from
Yeah.
the outset. And then I had to think, ooh. And so I actually went back, and the first so many pages are their backstory, how they meet as students at Memorial. And Millie just thinks it's in the stars that they're a couple and they stay together and they're meant to be. But yeah, a lot of people did question, like, this smart lawyer, what's she doing with this guy who can't go to the store and buy 4 dozen eggs without trauma?
That's interesting because there's a phenomenon with that in writing in Western culture. And everyone's mileage might vary. You know what I mean? Like you might have one group of readers who's like, this person is unlikable, and there's another group of readers that says no. A good example, I'll give two, but one is Breaking Bad, where like you're supposed to hate Walter White, by episode 6. Like, the writers are like, and this is the point where you're supposed to know that this is an unlikable person, and we're following the story of him. You're supposed to not like him. Like, it's not a bug, it's a feature. But there were people that continued to like him for many seasons, and the writers were just losing their minds, being like, why are people still sympathetic towards this guy?
So that's interesting, because Walter's arc is from good to evil, where the
Some people were
traditional
shocked
arc,
about that in the last episode.
the traditional arc is someone who goes from flawed to less flawed.
Yeah.
So Henry, for example, in Supermarket Baby, he's a deeply flawed human, but we all are, right? But in the book, he learns that you have to let go of what you can't control, and he's perfecting his soul. So he's like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. Like, he can't wait to get to February 3rd, but he doesn't realize what he has, that he has like a wife and a son who love him. He's got life pretty good. He's had to retire. He can't go golfing with his buddies, but it takes him to the end of the book to sit back and say, like, I've got a good life.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. The other example is that I was going to give was Homer Simpson, actually, like, because he is on paper, especially in the first like 10 seasons of The Simpsons, which is all anyone ever watched, like an unlikable human, only redeemed by Marge. Like, okay, she's a decent human being and she likes him, and so that's the only thing that like the writers thought redeemed him, kind of thing. And it's interesting that like how tastes change, that like when you're writing a story about like a lovable idiot, like who has like a more together spouse, people instead of go like, oh well, she likes him so I like him, kind of thing, but now it's like, why is she with him, which people did, in fairness, ask of Merge back in the day.
Yeah, I thought I had a question for book clubs at the end of the book that touched on that. I have Henry describes Millie as a pit bull in her work and a puppy dog with the save the world gene whenever someone is downtrodden. Does this explain how Millie ended up with Henry? And I don't think it does, because as you'll see from chapter 1 and their backstory, that's not what it brought Millie to realize that Henry was her partner for life. But it could be, like in another novel, it could be that Henry is such a space cadet that he's like a case that needs to be saved.
You have questions for a book club in the back of your book?
Yes, 17 of them.
Odd. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. It's the first one is the entire action of the novel takes place in a 2-week period, just like Dash's favorite game, Fortnite. Did you find yourself rooting for Henry to survive the nightmare? Because the entire main action takes place in 2 weeks. So just as Dash is trying to survive a virtual zombie apocalypse in his video game, Henry is trying to survive 2 weeks in a torturous Newfoundland spring.
Interesting. Okay. Susan Flanagan, what is the best money that you ever spent as a writer? So however you define that, if you justified it as, I need that for my writing, it could be a class, it could be a fun pen, it could be a typewriter, whatever it is.
You know what? Most of my money from writing comes from nonfiction.
No, spent on your writing, money that you spent.
Oh, I see. Okay. I flew to Halifax to attend Word on the Street outside their fabulous new library, and I pitched the publisher there before the Writers Alliance of Newfoundland and Labrador ever had their first pitch the publisher. And it was expensive, but I have a brother living just outside Halifax, and he is a novel writer as well. So we both went and pitched. And I lived in Halifax. I went to King's College and did a journalism degree, where I met my husband. So I have a big heart for Halifax. And I said, while I'm here for 3 days, I said, I'm not going to worry about money. I'm going to pretend I'm a tourist. I took my brother out to dinner. I did save on hotel because we stayed at his place. And it was fantastic. And I used money from writing for that trip. And there was a big payoff because that resulted in an offer from a publisher in Nova Scotia, which subsequently led me to sending out the manuscript or sending out a note to all those publishers who have requested the full manuscript and said, I have an offer. Would you like to place an offer too? And then I had 2 on the table. So it was money well spent, and it was a fun 3 days.
Awesome. Fun. That is really good money well spent. Yeah. The question you thought you were answering is the next one. Susan Flanagan, what did you do with the first money you made from being an author?
I didn't frame the check, and the money back in the day for freelance nonfiction writing was very good in the early 90s. The most I ever made was $2 a word.
That's awesome.
Most magazines didn't pay that, but you have to realize that I had 4 children by the age of 30 and then 1 later. So any money I made either got sucked into groceries or a new roof on the house or went straight to the mortgage.
Yeah. I'm there too. Like writing is not in the same way. It's not in the same way, but like writing is my day job. So when people ask me like, what do I do? It's like, pay my mortgage. Like, it's never anything fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, one thing that I found really interesting is not Supermarket Baby, but I have another novel coming out this summer with
Running the Goat. Excellent company. Yes.
Broadside, Marnie Parsons. So the advance I received, and this is a sign of the times, and I'm very grateful for any advance, but it was the same as what Margaret Mitchell received for Gone with the Wind.
Okay. Yeah.
So isn't that interesting?
Many years later.
Yeah.
I honestly, it is shocking that there's an advance at all. Like often when I have writers on, because that question is actually supposed to be, what did you get with you? What did you do with your first advance? But even professional writers, yeah, it's sadly become one of the things that is going away in the industry. But and like you said, it's a sign of dire industry straits, and we really need to get people out there buying and reading books more so that stuff like that can come back.
Yes, I guess though it does mean on the first royalty check I'll get more, but yes, most people who are in the business know that you cannot live on royalty checks unless
it's rough.
Really big. But I'd love to see something here in Canada like they have in Iceland, where Christmas, and it could be another occasion, but it's a time of book giving. So in Iceland, their literacy rate was 100%, and I think 1 in 4 Icelanders will publish a novel in their lifetime. Now that is pretty amazing statistics, but they promote and support their own. And I know we do in Canada as well, but at Christmas, it's not like, what would you like as a gift for Christmas? It's what book would you like?
Yep.
And I think if we could do that here in Canada, our authors would be better off.
Yeah. Especially if Canadian content was encouraged, kind of thing.
Yes. That's definitely done in Iceland.
Yeah, for sure. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much, Susan Flanagan, author of Supermarket Baby from Flanker Press, for coming on the Write Project podcast. Please come back anytime. We've got tons of questions for a wonderful author like you that I'm sure our readers will need. And everyone else, please check out Supermarket Baby.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.